Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Chicago Corner. I'm joined by my co-host, Jose Requena. Welcome to the show, Jose.
Hey, how's it going, Jack?
Very good, thanks. And I see that you survived the July 4th weekend. Thankfully, safely.
Yeah.
All limbs intact, all digits and limbs intact.
Yeah, it's not too bad. It's more like 4 hot dogs, because of the damage.
Well, it was quite a scene downtown. I was down there in the evening. It was probably around 10 o'clock. And I think that I read afterwards that the city had initiated a curfew at 10, which I wasn't aware of because I was on a friend's balcony. But it got pretty rowdy downtown with a lot of people deciding that garbage dumpsters were receptacles for M80s and other kinds of explosives. It literally sounded like mortar rounds all over the loop along the riverfront. But we also got some news that a lot of people were arrested due to all kinds of shenanigans, and we warned everybody.
Actually, I drove.
Yeah, go ahead.
I drove into downtown July the 4th when I saw that they were locking down Millennium Park and going to institute a curfew. I just I was hoping that nothing that happened last summer were to happen again. Like tear gas or something like that. It was a chaotic scene downtown, but I don't think it was anything. It was more like the Taste of Chicago or Lollapalooza cleanup. Then I think that a lot of the pearl clutching that was going on on Twitter at real time while it was happening. It still seemed like a real headache for the police. They arrested 60 people. I think that has more to do with the tensions between police and communities in Chicago than how much of a danger the crowd posed.
Yeah, well, I want to be fair about this. I agree with you that I think that from what we saw Friday with the city council meeting, it did seem that the police were on high alert, maybe a little bit more, agitated or maybe looking for escalation than we would like. But, in fairness, as I was reading what happened from Channel 5 Chicago, I'll quote from the article that we're looking at here, an estimated several thousand people inundated Chicago's South Loop Sunday night at the height of Independence Day celebrations, leading to at least 60 arrests, according to Chicago police. Now, luckily, I agree with you, Jose, it wasn't what we saw last year, which was, far more tragedies were going on with tear gas being dispersed. But what police were responding to were fireworks being set off in the middle of streets, as shown in videos posted to social media, leading to a heightened police presence and closures in the downtown area. While police confirmed at least 60 people had been arrested, it wasn't immediately known what the arrests were for. In a separate incident involving a large gathering, 2 Chicago police officers were dispersing a crowd on the city's west side early Monday when someone in a group of people fired shots, striking both officers, police stated. And that's another story we're going to kind of move on to in a moment, because there were a lot of shootings over the weekend. And, from my own experience being downtown Sunday night and hearing the explosions in the loop, and this was like between 10 and midnight, there was a lot of, look, I'm not going to pearl clutch. We all engage in illegal fireworks if we have access to them to celebrate the 4th. But even when I got home, I found firework debris in my patio from my neighbors who were celebrating in the alley. And I'm like, this could have set off, and it did set off fires, as I know you were sharing with me before the show, with people not being careful or responsible with what they were doing to celebrate.
Yeah, there's garage fire right down my block. Yeah. The garage fire happened right down my block for that reason. Yeah, for sure.
So we were seeing a lot of people shooting off the fireworks throughout the loop, which I think is cause for concern when you have to take into account their explosives. And was going on all over the city. I was at
But
1 East Superior on the balcony, so I had like a view down at like Rock and Roll McDonald, well, the old Rock and Roll McDonald's, and the riverfront, and I was just shocked at all the explosions I was hearing, like in the Loop. Normally, you hear that in the residential areas where, there isn't as heavy a police presence, but.
right. Well, where it's also like, not all the street lights work in all the residential areas, where not all the parks are as well serviced as, Millennium Park. So like, there wasn't a lot going on in the city. Like, the fireworks coming back to the lakefront, I think, attracted young people looking for something to do after a year of COVID. And I also think there was just a lot of politics. I want to downplay the throwing out like a firework that's meant like it was more than just roaming. It was real fireworks going off in the street. That's not safe. But I also saw that the superintendent of the police had like a new downtown lockdown plan that like aldermen were calling into question, and like, politics were in play in real time about, whether the police were being punitive enough to teenagers, hence I think the exaggerated amount of arrests, I don't know. I don't think downtown Chicago was definitely chaos and definitely fireworks, in a city that gets this many shootings, isn't welcomed anywhere. But unless you're the one blowing them off, I think it's kind of the hypocrisy that comes with fireworks, that I definitely engage in. But I don't know. The police definitely have, a full plate on, enough on their plate in this city. I think the fact that, so many of our murders go unsolved, so many of these shootings go unsolved, is the one that, they mostly deal with. So headaches to distract from that, like this, obviously are annoyance, but I don't think that, especially as we cover more stories throughout today, I'm glad that we started with this because it was like a politicized kind of, I think, it was definitely chaotic, but from being there, the energy level was mostly, raucous teenagers that didn't have guns, fortunately, that weren't, weren't causing dangers on sidewalks. And we're mostly in a tense, kind of a standoff, of being this from downtown early from the police that, just last year, I'm sure many, had tough encounters when protesting during the George Floyd protests. So, I don't have much more to share. Like fireworks definitely are not safe. Like I said, someone set fire to their garage right here down my block. 60 arrests. I don't know that, that was necessarily reflective of how much danger, the teens were actually put.
They had originally canceled fireworks. They had originally canceled fireworks, and then on Friday they announced we were going to have fireworks on Saturday the 3rd. So I was there on Sunday the 4th. There were no fireworks, although we could see. It was crazy, Jose. Like literally from the vantage point I could see, looking out west, the entire sky was lit up with fireworks. I think from like 9:30 well past midnight. It was really cool. I don't know if the suburbs had coordinated or if they were just people shooting out professional fireworks in their backyards, but you could see as far out west on the horizon, literally like across the horizon, a lot of fireworks shows. I think that were in a lot of our western suburbs. But I was just shocked at how late they went, given how short a show that Chicago had on Saturday night. I think that they were shooting the fireworks off from a barge in the lake. But you also spoke a moment ago to the that you felt that that policy was evolving through the weekend as far as the lockdowns. I wasn't paying as much attention to social media, but from I guess that city council meeting on Friday that went through the 4th, what did you follow stuff on social media that was suggesting that they were kind of making stuff up as they went along as far as lockdowns and curfews?
Yeah, like, and I guess how they are locking down downtown for the money class. At the end of the day, and we're going to cover this later, like all of
Yeah.
the events of the 4th was seen as a huge embarrassment to the city and another like ding on this police superintendent's record. I'm not going to bat here for the police superintendent of Chicago. I'm just saying that, like, downtown was locked down punitively, and there's still harsh criticisms, from the right, to be much more punitive. Essentially, what I see is just like playing politics with police policy, ultimately to make the discussion about not whether there will be more money, but how much more money and where.
Of course.
It's a pretty comfortable place, policy-wise, conversation-wise, to move the next election towards. And I'm frustrated by that.
I am in agreement on that. Here's another story that just kind of like closes up the reporting on the fireworks.
Yeah.
Dumpster behind his Logan Square apartment. Craig Alexander Rothrow was awoken around 5:30 a.m. the following morning by firefighters pounding on his door. The dumpster behind his Logan Square apartment building had caught fire and spread to his back deck. This is a separate incident from the garage fire you mentioned. Rothwell said there's only one explanation for the blaze, which caused no injuries but destroyed the back of his apartment building, fireworks. Rothwell was among dozens of Chicagoans whose homes, garages, and dumpsters caught fire during the week's July 4th festivities, although Chicago Fire Department spokesman Larry Merritt couldn't confirm fireworks caused the fire behind Rothwell's home, saying only that it started with an open flame in the dumpster, but it was a busy weekend. I think it's fairly obvious, even if they don't have the direct evidence what was going on. So, people just got to be more careful. I mean, we've got so many other major things we got to contend with, and that has to do with our police violence and shootings that we also saw this weekend. And Jose, this was your story that you brought to my attention. I've got it up here on the screen. I'll pass it along to you.
I mean, there is a real danger in Chicago, and I don't want to downplay it. I feel like I often do stray a little over that. That's very unfortunate. A University of Chicago student has died days after being struck by a stray bullet on the Green Line. He was a Denver native. Max Lewis died days after he was shot on the L train. Friends remembered him, an outgoing and welcoming presence. Not to, like you had shared that great story of people exploring all of Chicago. Being on the Green Line is a pretty common thing. Being caught by a stray bullet is not, but it's not unheard of either. And this was the University of Chicago student that unfortunately had this story. Max Lewis didn't have to make the trek downtown. The affable 20-year-old University of Chicago junior had the option to work from home. For the competitive internship, he landed at the Loop investment firm, but he loved getting to know as many people as he could, according to his best friend. He loved the grind, Zach Hogan said of his classmate and fraternity brother. Lewis was commuting home during rush hour Thursday when a bullet pierced the window of his train at the 51st Street Green Line station and entered his neck. He died at a hospital Sunday morning. Police said he wasn't the intended target. Investigators have yet to provide a possible description of the shooter. It's not even clear which direction the gunfire came from. It's a senseless tragedy for many reasons, Cogan said. Friends of Lewis remembered him as a gregarious jokester, a hyper-focused student, an avid runner, and a car guy, one who went out of his way to make people feel welcome. He was so incredibly caring, loyal, and genuine, said Cogan, who met Lewis on the first day of the prestigious Hyde Park campus and roomed with them at Alphi Upsilon Pi, the Jewish fraternity in which Lewis was president. He loved working hard for other people because he was so damn selfless, and he never wanted people to thank him for what he did. The Denver area native was studying economics and computer science. He graduated in 2019 from the Kent Denver School, a prestigious private school. His 12th grade physics teacher, Dr. Ryan Harrington, said in an email he grew into an exceptional scholar, full of good humor, curiosity, drive, and deep passion for technology. I'm just going to end it here. At the University of Chicago, Lewis was the leader of the Preventative Investment Research, a student group that helps interested undergrads produce and write research reports, a field Lewis was passionate about, his friend Victoria Jin said. It keeps going, and wanted to take that moment to just pay some respects to.
Yeah. There's a quote here. He was a ball of light, Chin said, especially in the early dark days of COVID-19, when the group's meetings were all virtual. Mm-hmm. Max would bring his energy like he was in person. He would give 120%, and you felt that through the screen. I mean, this is the flip side of the violence that is on our streets, the innocent victims. You've got, on one hand, what we saw in the earlier this year with Adam Toledo being shot by a police officer. Now you see the opposite side of, an innocent young man minding his own business being shot. Was it a stray bullet? Was it someone actually aiming at him? Who knows? But it was definitely had to be gang related, which is what gets our police department, on edge, which is understandable. But it's like,
we assume it's gang related.
Well, or if it was a stray bullet by somebody just shooting a gun off on the 4th of July, that's possible too. Who knows until they investigate more. It's going to be either one or the other. It was either, someone taking pot shots for fun, a stray bullet from gang violence, or a stray bullet from some idiot who didn't have fireworks and just decided to, shoot at a moving target, not realizing he could hit someone on the inside. So it's crazy, man.
I grew up, very, and this is an extreme tragedy, that has, definitely shaken, the community of University of Chicago, his family, his friends, his community back in Denver. And these are the stories that people take with them from, Chicago's violence. And we, take this time to reflect on the great, truly, great young people that, have been lost to the violence of Chicago. We don't know all their names and we don't know all their stories. I think, what all the, like with respect, to Max, like his story's elevated for different, reasons, but these kinds of senseless tragedies happen in Chicago every day. And we don't really take the time to, to highlight them as much as we used to. I grew up at a time when almost every single shooting in Chicago had some kind of, aspiring, hard-boiled novelist, like noir nonfiction, but actually taking the time to at least get some kind of background and reflection who the victims were, what the context of the violence in the area was, at least so there was some understanding to the narratives of where the violence was coming from. But sometimes it's this senseless tragedy. And I mean, like we, I do think that we need to, restructure the police so that we don't have an armed municipal army, basically dealing with every single human issue in the city. But, people that deal with these senseless tragedies in the cities, it definitely adds up. We have a lot of them. So I want to take the time just to highlight the story. There's another one.
The 6-year-old girl. I just actually saw that. I was queuing up our next story regarding the police officers who had been shot, and I came across the one about a 6-year-old. Let me paste that in here.
Yeah, we can maybe. Yeah, I mean, 2 police officers were shot. I think we can maybe also take time with the 6-year-old.
Let me
over
get
July 4th.
Give me just a second here. I have the police one queued, but I also have. There we go.
The police shooting story is pretty short. They were.
But as we're talking about innocent victims,
the officers were together.
This is here. All right, let me go to the police officer story. Then we'll come back to the 6-year-old.
Go.
And this happened late Sunday night, early Monday.
Right. 4th of July on the west side of Chicago, in the Austin neighborhood, around 1:45 a.m., gunfire broke out. One officer was shot in the foot. The second officer was shot in the upper thigh. The officers were taken to the hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. They heard shots and felt pain. Not sure if they were targeted or if it was people celebrating and shooting into the air. No one is at custody at this time. So that's, not a cakewalk. Definitely responding to all of these things happening in the city. This
I'd like to play
was shot in.
Let me play the story that comes from
Coleman.
WGN, since I do have the screen up. I just need to turn up the audio
Sure.
so our audience can follow it also.
Shot.
Come on, go back to the beginning.
Numbers yet, but according.
All right, here we go.
"72 people have been shot in the city since Friday evening. 5 of them were children. Those 5 children shot since Sunday afternoon." A 6-year-old girl shot in West Pullman is among the weekend victims. She and her mother were outside with others early this morning near 119th in South Michigan. Someone fired from a gray SUV, hitting the child in the hand and her mother in the back.
Likely, the 6-year-old wasn't a target, as we've seen too many times, tragically. Someone else is being targeted, and the unintended target, an innocent child, is struck.
Hours earlier, a 5-year-old girl was shot in the same neighborhood. She was in an alley at 117th and South Normal, where someone started shooting. The girl was hit in her right leg. Police say her condition is stable at Roseland Community Hospital. And children were injured in a drive-by this morning in Washington Park. 6 people were shot.
Hi, Gina and Julie. Not a bad assignment today, huh? It's
in
beautiful
critical
out here.
condition
There's
at
a
Comer
slight
Children's
breeze, but it
Hospital.
is pretty
A
hot. So we
13-year-old
are
boy
seeing a
is
lot.
stable. Investigators put down more than 100 evidence markers at the scene. They have no suspects in custody.
No more. We ask each and every individual throughout all of our communities in Chicago to get on top of your alderman and call for a no confidence vote in Superintendent Brown.
If policing kept us safe, we would be the safest community in the country. And clearly we are not. The community is making this demand. They have been making this demand, and we will continue to make this demand, all of us together, until we are heard and we see the results that we request.
Those community activists spoke outside police headquarters here just a few moments ago. Some of the organizations represented: Black Lives Matter, Violence Interrupters, and the Little Village Community Council. Now, Superintendent Brown recently defended his summer violence strategy before members of the City Council. That was a 6-hour session on Friday. He pointed to the success of Memorial Day weekend, the last major holiday, and that weekend numbers were lower, the lowest in years for that holiday weekend. Outside police headquarters, Judy Wang, WGN News.
Now, they've been fudging the numbers a lot. This was a big criticism that came up in that special session of City Council on Friday that Ed Heller and I were talking about, related to what comparing numbers. And I think, I don't know. I sometimes, Jose, we talk about this stuff. We know the solution. You don't put more money into the police. I mean, it's going to be a long-term solution, rediverting the money into the communities. But, we haven't started yet. No one knows when we're going to start. I constantly feel like every time we come on the show to talk about this, forgive my language, we're like pissing in the wind every time.
Yeah. We need major markers to advance these fights. Unseating, Lori Lightfoot because she's failed to deliver on her campaign promises, would be one of those markers that would indicate the tide turning. Her maybe not dragging her feet and actually, instituting some kind of civilian oversight, admitting fault. But I think that's not going to really happen.
She's got a grip on power in the mayor's office right now,
right,
from an elected
right,
school board to the citizens advisory. She just doesn't want it. She's very authoritarian.
Well, I think it's also been I think it's been revealed that she won in large part because her funders, her campaign donors want that consolidated power within the office, and that's really what she's there to protect. And is that really helping solve anything? You see here the superintendent's getting criticism. I was somewhat, softly trying to just, divert criticism of the way the police handled the 4th in downtown from the right wing kind of elements of Chicago, which just demand more punitive, enforcement from police to send messages, not, as deterrence. to communities. But here we see criticisms from, what is more of a community grassroots, what can be deemed kind of more left-wing Chicagoans saying, they have no confidence in the police superintendent, that they see continued violence in their communities. And the answer is to have more police patrols. Yeah. And not community investment.
Drones. Yeah. We talked about this on Friday's show. I forgot which ward, but they're talking about introducing drones into the neighborhoods now, because the blue light cameras apparently aren't enough to figure out how to solve crimes or keep an eye on what's going on before it happens.
Yeah, they're automating police.
Well, speaking of the no confidence in Superintendent David Brown, this story comes from the Chicago Tribune as he addressed the holiday weekend violence, but the chief judge defends bail reform. Excuse me, come on, get out of the way. Sorry, my cat's crawling across the desk here in front of the camera. Although you can't see him, he was right underneath the camera. So at Friday's city council meeting, I believe the mayor as well as Superintendent Brown were talking about the fact that the early bail reforms are what are putting more violent offenders on the street, but that they were fudging those numbers as far as it was more innocent defendants that were being put out on the streets in these during the bail reform efforts, or the amount of people who were sitting in jail because they couldn't get speedier trials, that they were putting on monitoring programs.
Yeah. I mean, like it's a blame game going on right now, where it seems like Lori Lightfoot and her police superintendent are trying to blame the county and their handling of the legal system and how it ties into the state. It's all Democrats interfighting, passing blame, but the whole system's at fault. This response from Superintendent Brown was expected and still delivered, without taking in the fact that internal emails show that the mayor's office is aware of the fact that it's not necessarily the court's fault for any of this. That that's not what the studies are showing. That's not being addressed. So it's.
Let me quote from the.
Let me quote from
the Tribune article real quickly.
This is where.
After at least 108 people were shot, 17 fatally during the extended holiday weekend, Chicago Police Superintendent David Brown on Tuesday insisted his department did its part in fighting the violence while casting blame once again on Cook County's judicial system. Finger pointing is your word that you use, Brown said to the media during a news conference at Chicago Police headquarters. I'm ready to debate about, do we continue to release violent people in our courts into these communities? The message from Brown wasn't new. In recent times when Chicago has finished an especially violent weekend, he has often complained that what he believes is too lenient criminal justice system is putting too many suspects back on the street. Brown said too many criminal defendants are out on bail and electronic monitoring for serious offenses, even murders. Court officials and crime experts have pushed back on that narrative with data that suggests issues in the bond system are not the root cause of the problem.
There you go.
There you go.
Yeah. I like what Arturo Medina here has to say. I could say from experience, Chicago leaders will never get along and will always blame one another. And, I don't think that this past weekend in Chicago was anything other than life in Chicago. But we still get the circus of, you're responsible for the systemic, breakdown. You're the responsible for the systemic breakdown. Really, everyone's hoarding the COVID money, for their small business connected friends. It's not a blanketed, system, and for the police force. So, they're all at fault. We all saw that last year.
Yeah. Continuation, more of the same. As our president said during the election on the national level, nothing will fundamentally change. Look, Lightfoot is just an extension of Rahm Emanuel's policies as I see it. We thought that she would change things running as a progressive. She campaigned a lot of things that we thought were progressively minded, and she just reverted back to her. She's a cop. She's a cop. We got a cop as mayor, and a lot of people warned voters about this. And I voted for, and I was wrong. A lot of people who pointed to Lightfoot and said, "You're just going to be getting an authoritarian cop there. Is not going to change anything." We're right. Unfortunately, we were wrong.
Yeah, and I think Lightfoot, like she had the wherewithal to run on progressive rhetoric. I sometimes the trouble.
A lot of politicians are these days.
Right. But I think that she's a bit more. Her hand is she's much more involved than just like playing lip service to this stuff. She's also. Sometimes the problem with some politicians is they pay lip service to it and then they fail to deliver. And then that's seen as what they pay lip service to as not being, the right answer. What Lightfoot's been doing is trying to take the stuff that she's paid lip service to and transform it into her own policies, her own image of Chicago. In that sense, she is still Ron Emanuel trying to make an image of Chicago of herself is exactly what Ron Emanuel would do. But yeah, it's not anything that's making life better, safer, or more dynamic in Chicago. And I think heading into her year, despite COVID, I think that Chicago's had a better response than most places, but that's been despite her instincts. We've had to call on the governor to prevent schools from reopening and to keep small businesses closed for an extended period of time until he finally caved into that pressure.
Yeah, agreed.
Mm-hmm.
So one of our aldermen, actually one of our more favorite aldermen, Alderman Byron, am I pronouncing his name? You can help me pronounce his name correctly. Sigcho-Lopez? Am I pronouncing it correctly? Okay. Alderman Byron Sigcho-Lopez. He had a press conference in direct response to what we're talking about here. And I'll quote from the article. This comes from Block Club Chicago, Francesca Matthews. And as Police Superintendent David Brown blamed illegal guns, bond reform, and closed courts for a violent Independence Day weekend, a Southside alderman met with Chinatown residents Monday to call for more community-based violence prevention measures. Chicago saw more than 90 people wounded in shootings over the long holiday weekend. Among them were a 27-year-old woman and 41-year-old man who were shot Monday morning in Chinatown. Alderman Byron Sigcho-Lopez of the 25th held a Tuesday morning news conference in response to the violence. Families, children, young people, and parents, time after time, bring his picture up a little bit more, time after time, have talked about a need for change, Sigcho-Lopez said. We cannot continue to normalize this level of violence. The shooting happened around 9:38 a.m. Monday in the 300 block of West 23rd Street. The victims were standing on the sidewalk when someone in a car drove up and fired shots, hitting the woman in her legs and the man multiple times throughout his body, police said. So now we've just got drive-by thrill-seeker shootings. Much like what we heard about the child in the story earlier. People just, or this young man on the train just out there minding their own business, and gunfire everywhere in places you'd least expect. The man took himself to a Mercy hospital and was transferred to Stroger Hospital, where he was in serious condition, police said. The woman was taken to Stroger Hospital and was also seriously wounded. No one was in custody and an investigation was ongoing. Sigcho-Lopez was joined by activists and leaders from neighborhood groups, including Grace Chan McKibben from the Coalition for a Better Chinese American Community and Hong Liu from Midwest Asian Health Association. All called for an approach to violence prevention that focuses more on providing resources and investing directly in the community in addition to improving community relations with police. Residents need to feel comfortable going to the police. Part of that is making sure that there are officers who speak Mandarin and Cantonese, but also investing in more long-term solutions like housing, education, and workforce development, Chan McKibben said. It's like an echo chamber. Liu said there also needs to be more funding for mental health care. Agreed. Funding from the city could support initiatives such as making psychiatrists free or accessible to at-risk community members. That federal COVID money could have gone a long way towards redeployment in our mental health clinics and towards mental health care. Mental health is a big part of what drives violence, she said. At a separate news conference Tuesday morning, Brown repeated controversial claims he and Mayor Lori Lightfoot have made, blaming an uptick in violence on the courts, not prosecuting people and judges releasing violent offenders. Always about the Band-Aid solution afterwards, incarcerating more people, never enough about where the money should go ahead of time, in everything that our alderman here is talking about, as well as these other activists at these news conferences. Brown said police cleared 10 murders, arrested about 60 young people, and took in more than 200 illegal guns during the long holiday weekend. He said violence can be traced back to a lack of action from the courts, and said the police have advocated for a whole city approach to reducing crime. Sigcho-Lopez dismissed those claims. The research is very clear. We've been provided with ample evidence from Loyola that there's an extremely low correlation between violent crime and releases. He said, citing a recent report released by Loyola University, which found just 3% of defendants let out on bond committed another offense during their pretrial period. The strategy by the police department, which is focused on a wide net of issues, primarily focusing on seizing guns, has failed. They're not focusing on the segment of the population that is at high risk. Sigcho-Lopez and community members urge the police department and the mayor's office to pivot on a more holistic strategy and quickly. We can't wait till the end of the summer to invest in violent prevention, Sigcho-Lopez said. We need to prevent violence so we're not consistently reacting to the issue. That's the main word, reacting. Jose.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of like what we talked about with the police superintendent, you know.
Have there, I'm kind of speaking off the cuff here, but has there ever been a time I don't know the answer to this, but I'm wondering if there's ever been a time where the police department actually interacted with any kind of, I don't know, communication or interaction with gangs. I'm going to sound ridiculous here talking about this, but I'm a big fan of that old show, Hill Street Blues. Did you ever watch that show, Jose,
no.
back in the 80s? Well, it was about a police department in a city very much like Chicago. And the chief of this police department was regularly interacting and interfacing with the gangs to try to, basically, the police department was trying to de-escalate by having interaction with the gangs. They would have gang summits. They would have, the different leaders of the different factions of the gangs and the warring gangs in the neighborhoods, and literally try to broker agreements with the gangs to keep the violence down. And now that's Hollywood. I don't know how much of that was inspired by actual police departments in the 70s and 80s having that kind of interaction with gang culture, as opposed to what we're talking about with the city putting the money into the communities ahead of time to prevent reacting to the issue, and by more preventing the issue. I don't necessarily know that the solution is interacting or brokering agreements with gangs so much as it is offering younger people more opportunities so they don't gravitate towards the gangs, towards the crime.
During COVID, Lori Lightfoot let gangs beat the shit out of people if they were going to be looting their neighborhoods. So they still do that. Yeah, what you're saying. It's just it's not like Hollywood.
In this show they weren't necessarily allowing the gangs to run roughshod in the neighborhood. They were basically there was the chief of police or the police captain was always interfacing with the mayor's office to provide youth centers, to provide the things that the gangs wanted in their neighborhoods for the younger people, just to be distracted or have opportunities and stuff. I mean, again, Hollywood stuff, but not too far off what we're talking about with.
Right. So I'm 35 years old, right? So I was born in the 80s. So I don't know, but I can guess, that anything that if gangs got a YMCA, it was only, to organize voters and for politics, not for community, whatever the hell. Because most of the gangs got killed during the 90s and the gang wars. And really, all of the smaller gangs, the Incas, the Bishops, the Saints, all of that got killed off by the Latin Kings in Chicago that locked up the drug trade, and they still are in the city. So are the other gangs. But, That's just me talking bullshit because I don't really know. I mean, that's just what I gleaned from growing up in Little Village in the 90s and then, being in the neighborhood and growing up in Chicago as a 35-year-old.
Yeah. Speaking of gangs, I'd seen another story on Block Club. Not to go off in this direction, but I forget. It was a very famous gang leader. I don't remember if it was the Aldermans or. Anyway, he was denied bail. I guess he denied probation. He was denied. Let me look this up quickly on Block. Well, it's kind of a detour. We should stick with our regular stories. But it's just reminding me that he's a very famous gang member. I'm forgetting from which gang from the 1970s. He's been in jail for a long time, and apparently, he's up for parole or something, and they denied it. Anyway, but yeah, this story about Alderman sigcho-lopez, I thought was very relevant to everything we've been talking about and seeing with what the superintendent's been saying, what the mayor's office has been saying, and offering reactive solutions instead of preventative measures.
This is like what you said, like Jamal Green has been talking about his community center. Yep. People have been asking for funding from the Obama Library to be put into these kinds of programming, since, for like the last 8 years. Maria Haddon, and the 49th that's, has these, we're pushing this, into city council. I think that Chicagoans have asked for these kinds of solutions, but they have it in their own different ways. Some people ask for drones. Some people ask for foot patrols. Some people ask for, whatever the investment is, it's to keep the young people that are currently congregating there occupied in a productive and healthy way. It tends to be that all that money becomes very political and it goes back into the police. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
One of our live chat visitors, hey, Art, thanks for participating. He says, I'll go back up again. He makes a point. We've got these programs where they're offering people money to turn in their guns. If a billionaire offers a city $1 billion to use to have citizens turn in illegal unregistered guns, no questions asked, for $10,000 each, then people would turn in thousands of guns. But then they'd have money for new guns. So, that kind of solution is kind of ridiculous also. These programs where they're getting, turn in your guns for money or prizes and stuff. Never liked cop shows much. The Hill Street Blues theme was top-notch, though. Anyway, so, yeah, well, that kind of wraps up so much of what we saw continue in Chicago with the violence, the shootings, the finger-pointing, and the continued lack of people following a different road to solution. They're continuing the insanity, the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and over again. Let's put more money to the police, and that'll solve the problem. And we're just not seeing results. So this is interesting that you brought this to my attention today when we were doing show prep, because there was somebody on Twitter who had tagged us a few weeks ago, and I did put this in my notes as far as this is something we should probably cover, these variants of COVID, now that everybody's back on the streets again. And there are some concerns, and this was your story to share with us. So I've got it up on screen here if you want to share with our viewers what's happening here.
Yeah, I think it has a video. I don't know if you
let me play it.
You want to just play it? Yeah, why don't we just do that?
Video. Of course, I got to turn the volume up.
The Delta variant. Will a booster shot be needed?
Booster shots.
The rise in Delta variant cases around the globe mean for those who received the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. While preliminary data shows both two-shot vaccines continue to offer protection against the Delta variant, questions over whether the single-shot J&J vaccine offers the same level of protection have been raised. Currently, little data has been released showing just how effective the J&J is at protecting against the Delta variant, though it is believed that the vaccine does offer protection against the variant. Dr. Scott Gottlieb, former FDA commissioner, reportedly said the J&J vaccine appears to be about 60% effective against the Delta variant. While studies have shown that the available vaccines work against variants, including the Delta variant, all two-dose vaccines offer significantly more protection following their second dose. According to the studies from the UK, the vaccines were protective for those who got both doses, but were less so among those who got one dose. Chicago's top doctor, Allison Arwady, reported that a recent study showed the Pfizer vaccine was 84% effective against the variant after 2 doses, but only 34% effective after the first dose. Moderna also announced Tuesday that its vaccine produced promising protection in a lab setting against the Delta variant and others currently circulating. Dr. Arwady said,
I wonder if it was the same lab where they created the COVID virus that got out. Anyway,
any of the 3 vaccines currently being used in the U.S. continue to show good results as far as protection.
The biggest thing still is that the vaccine remains really very well protected against it. And so across all types of variants here in Chicago, since a vaccine was fully available, 98% of our deaths, 97% of our hospitalizations have been in people who were not fully vaccinated, and that has been holding even for the Delta variant.
The larger concern, she said, comes for unvaccinated individuals and potentially high-risk populations.
Broadly, we definitely have some concern about the Delta variant because if there are unvaccinated social networks or neighborhoods in Chicago, even a single case is more likely to spread and more likely to cause more people to get COVID. And so the most important thing, of course, is to get vaccinated.
So far, there has been no recommendation from the CDC surrounding booster shots with the Delta variant. Dr. Sharon Welbell, Director of Hospital Epidemiology and Infection Control for Cook County Health, said in a statement, while research continues to be published about the strong efficacy of the COVID-19 vaccines, there have been no formal recommendations regarding booster shots. So far, Illinois has 84 cases of the variant as of data reported Sunday. That's compared to 6,505 cases of the Alpha variant, also known as
84.
the UK variant.
what's that?
So he says 84 cases as of Sunday, and the article's updated to say 174 cases as of Monday, yesterday. So that number's more than doubled. Yeah, just slightly doubled.
Right after Chicago has reopened.
Yeah.
This is local numbers.
Yeah.
Right, let's continue.
174 of the variant. Yeah.
Which is likely the most prolific strain in the state of Illinois. The Delta variant is expected to become the dominant strain for Illinois cases by the fall, Governor J.B. Pritzker said on Monday.
Already the Delta variant that sent Israel back into mitigation is a growing presence in Illinois. We expect it to dominate our cases statewide by the fall.
Okay, so Jose, you're vaccinated. I'm vaccinated. I don't care. I'm vaccinated. I'm going back to wearing my mask when I go out.
Mm-hmm. I
It's
still
scary shit.
Yeah, I usually wear my mask indoors. I'm guilty of indoor dining restaurant usage, but I'm usually pretty mask conscious. And if people say something, I'm just like, I work around kids who are not vaccinated, so like you don't want that. I think that it's unfortunate, that it was heartbreaking to see in real time last year that like the U.S. strategy was to let people just get sick if they're going to choose to get sick, and if they're going to create, variants or exacerbate, public health, then, how do you make money off that? And if you can't, then, you let those people die. That's the solution to that.
Well, and I also want to throw in here the real obscenity of everything that happened last year was how the media allowed this to become a political issue.
Right.
If you were red or blue, it had to do with whether you were a Trump supporter or whether you were a liberal Democrat.
Right.
To politicize science, medicine.
Yeah.
Don't listen to the president. Don't listen to, although, in Fauci's case, he gave some misdirection and screwed the pooch as far as telling people early on, well, you don't need masks because they wanted to protect the mask supply. You want to talk about totally like criminally negligent in that case. What's scary here is that I still talk to people who don't want to get a vaccination because they go down these rabbit holes that are more political than they have to do with research in medicine and science. And I would never. This is at the root of our problem right now. These people who are still not vaccinated, who are catching these variants that could even threaten those of us who got vaccinated and are wearing masks. Yeah, it's fueled by this ignorance that has to do with political dogma.
There's a reason for that. The reason for that, in my opinion, is that the solution all of last year to the problem that we were facing while the science was up in the air and people were not, totally sure at the onset of the pandemic what to believe or what, how the severity of it, the solution was political. Lock everything down, stop everything, to the bare bones, even essential business, start giving people money, forgive rents and mortgages, and see how long we can be in quarantine as a nation to let this blow over. That's a political solution to trying to figure out the science of COVID. But the media, are the Democrats, the corporations that run our country, that run our lives, that was not a tenable solution. So we get a bunch of BS, and from the public, and that gets amplified as why we can't, why we have to just bear with the best that the billionaire class can do, in the face of such an unruly mob. And that's kind of what gets my goat, is that the billionaire class counts on an unruly mob to turn on itself for them to pick up portions of it. My thing is that Fox News has been a political project my entire life. They make great movies and cartoons, but like for the Fox Corporation, but it is an international project. Rupert Murdoch's an Australian citizen. He's got media all over England, all over the English-speaking world, which, English has become like the global language of business. Fox News is a
propaganda.
Well, it's a political force around the world. Yeah. They were adverse to Trump during his initial campaign, and they got hit by the right by Breitbart News. And then suddenly, the combined forces of Trump's global empire and their political global impact gave us the insanity of the Trump years. So they're a business more than they're a fascist project. But I blame media hysteria a lot on them because they're better at it than CNN, than MSNBC, than Bloomberg News, than Al Jazeera. They're better at it. Fox News is a force to be reckoned with. They're Disney International, they're Amazon International. They're like these other guys. CNN is garbage, MSNBC is dog shit, Bloomberg News takes itself seriously. That's what it's really good at.
They all take themselves seriously. I would argue CNN and MSNBC.
CNBC is just the devil. They're just that's hell incarnate. But Fox News understands human beings and meets them where they're at, and then it transforms them, which is why they're, in my opinion, better and scarier at it. But the crowd that has exacerbated this problem, in my opinion, has been the people that cling onto Fox News as the last arbitrator of even if what they're saying is BS, they wouldn't betray me. That's the relationship that Fox has with, a big portion of its base. And that's what I feel has exacerbated these issues in America.
Yeah. .com, one of our viewers says, you have to take into account also science does not exist in a bubble outside of other things like capitalism. People who are skeptical of things like vaccination might have a history with the medical field, for instance, being hooked on opioids and then having to turn to street drugs when their insurance runs out. It's not always about political discourse. Well, that is an interesting point. But yeah, getting back to the our different. This is a good point. The opioid epidemic has made a lot of people skeptical of the medical industry. .com, I understand that. I do understand that. And given that we've recently discovered that it's becoming more and more clear, COVID was created in a lab funded by not only our government, but other world governments to basically create a super virus so that they could create an antidote for it without understanding that, you create something that could potentially get out of control. What they
just definitely created in the lab though.
I think that the evidence is pointing to that. Yeah. The Wuhan lab. Yeah. Not only our government,
Is there an article recently that
they've been talking about this for the past couple of weeks. Let me see if I can pull up a link here. I've been following this a lot in progressive media. Also, I know that Crystal Ball and Sagar over on Breaking Points have been covering it. Let me go to YouTube really quickly, please. Let me see if I can get a video up while you weigh in on this.
Yeah, I didn't know that it came out to be conclusive.
Not conclusive. I'm sorry, not conclusive, but the evidence is pointing in that direction. That this wasn't ecological. This wasn't something that formed naturally outside of a lab. Because if it was, what I remember hearing was that if it was something that evolved naturally, ecologically, it would spread more outside in nature than just being indoors, people who have it spreading it to each other in enclosed spaces. That was one of the things that someone had said in some of the actually, I've got the wrong browser up. I'm sorry. And my keyboard's not working.
I don't know. There's a lot of things that we can weigh in on. I'm trying to weigh in on less. I don't know where COVID came from. If it came from a lab or it's ecological. I haven't seen anything that's like conclusive and haven't found really a source that I'm.
Well, there were some other things that came out of these congressional hearings, that there was another drug. Okay, now I can bring it up. Let me get my browser up here to YouTube. That there was a doctor that had testified before Congress that there was another drug. I think E. Heller and I had talked about this last Friday, that was being proposed as being very, very valuable in fighting COVID last year, and they just completely shut it down, even though it had proven results. The drug starts with an I. This is what happens, everybody, when we go off on a different detour and haven't prepped stuff ahead of time.
Yeah.
All right.
Can I give people a quick update on Mexico while you pull that up?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead. I don't have the link on the screen, but if you want to.
There was a couple stories I wanted to share with you guys, but we didn't have time to cover them today. But there's been some crazy stuff that's happened around the situation, as far as the governor of Tamaulipas. One of his close allies has been arrested in Texas, and the U.S. government has delivered that person to the United States. This is someone that is tied directly with the corruption charges that are being leveled against Cabeza de Vaca. So his extradition from the U.S. kind of shows that he'll probably be flipping on him. That's also the Attorney General's Office of Mexico has arrested the director, a federal police director, the federal police director of regional operations between 2006 and 2012. So this person oversaw Vicente Fox's administration and then the onset of the cartel wars with Felipe Calderon, and then exited in 2012. He has just been arrested on drug trafficking charges. This is like if Chicago's police, I don't know. This is like if John Ashcroft got arrested for trafficking drugs, during his crazy tenure. But all of this is getting kind of towards a dicey situation where now there's going to be a showdown between Mexico and the U.S. because Pemex, the oil company that was at the root of so much of the corruption charges embroiling Mexico's political elite, It also seems to be responsible for the Gulf of Mexico fire. At least that is one of the. I believe that refinery belongs to them. Now there was issues where there was other deposits of gas that were found near there that was up for grabs, and it's being awarded to Pemex through the courts, which is probably going to get some pushback from the U.S., the UK, and Germany that wanted access to those deposits, and then in light of the Gulf fire, can make the claim that Pemex does not have the understanding, know-how, or infrastructure to make use of those natural resources, which probably is for the better. They should just leave it in the ground, in my opinion. It's theirs, but we'll see.
That's interesting how it relates to what we saw over there in that fire. I'm sorry, I'm still like looking up the. Here we go. Breaking points. Do you want to go to the story that we were going to talk about with the strike update, Cook County strike update? I've got that.
Yeah. Well, can you share the link? Can you share that link on the chat?
The link that you sent me. Oh, the link. I've got the link in the show notes. But now you were sharing something from a newsletter that I couldn't open up in a link.
I can read that to you guys. This is to sign up for the a newsletter from Chicago DSA, the Red Star Bulletin. They're giving an update on SEIU 73's bargaining update. The fight drags on into a second week. Workers at SEIU 73 started an indefinite strike the day after NNOC walked out, hoping to increase their leverage with the 1-2 attack. From the beginning of bargaining, however, it was clear that this was going to be a long, ugly fight. The Cook County bargaining team has been playing hardball at the table, remaining unmovable on economic questions. In particular, they refused to budge on pivotal pay increases while tripling the cost of workers' health insurance. As it stands, the wage increase wouldn't come near to covering the insurance increase. The 2,500 workers represented by SEIU 73 are primarily Black and brown low-wage workers. Their jobs range from support staff at hospitals to custodians, technicians, administrative staff, and mental health care professionals. For decades, Cook County has treated these workers as disposable and ignored integral improvements in their conditions and pay. At the center of the fight is Cook County Board President and Democratic Party Chairperson Tony Preckwinkle. While Preckwinkle ran as the progressive choice and friend of labor in 2019 mayoral contest, it's clear that these were more empty campaign promises. Ultimately, as Cook County Board President, she has the final say over bargaining agreements and can end this strike fairly. SEIU 73 has taken a number of strike actions in the past 2 years, including alongside the Chicago Teachers Union in 2019 and a one-day action at Cook County in 2020, making them a persistent thorn in the side of Chicago's ruling class. Now it appears that Preckwinkle wants to make an example of SEIU 73 for having the audacity to fight for livable wages. Cook County's retaliatory mission is made evident by the deals they are willing to make with other unions that they refuse to concede to SEIU 73. AFSCME and the Teamsters also settled open contracts in the past month, but neither union threatened strike action. Astonishingly, they were offered the same pay increases that SEIU is currently asking for in their proposal. In other words, Preckwinkle was willing to concede pay increases to these two unions just as long as she could send a message that she won't tolerate unions who fight back. Dirty tactics like these are nothing short of union busting. It's clear that this will be a prolonged fight, but these workers aren't backing down yet. Last Tuesday, they took the fight straight to Preckwinkle with more than 1,000 members marching to the George W. Dune Cook County office building and occupied its offices. Picket lines continued over the holiday weekend. Workers doubled down on their resolve to win conditions they more than deserve. To show support, SEIU will continue to have picket lines up the coming week from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. at the following locations: Stroger Hospital, located at 1969 West Ogden; Provident Hospital, located at 500 East 51st Street; Cook County Jail, 2700 South California, shout out Little Village; Cook County Offices, 118 North Clark Building, downtown. They also say you can text Solidarity to 77222. Again, that's 77222. solidarity to get updates on these strikes. This is going to be a real fight. Toni Preckwinkle is a gangster. She's tough. She's an unmovable object. And if she's out to get SEIU 73, she's a very formidable figure. That
Jose, you still?
Oh yeah, I'm still here. Hello? You hear me okay? Oh man. Uh-oh. I think I pissed somebody off. Hello. Hello, hello, hello. Okay. I guess I'm still here. I don't know if Jerry is. I hope if you can hear me okay. Okay. Hopefully he'll join us again soon. Yeah, he'll be back. Toni Preckwinkle is the chairperson of the Democratic Party of Cook County. The reason that Chicago is a Democratic Party safe haven powerhouse is because Cook County has been in the hands of the Democrats. If you can take out the Cook County Democrats, you might be able to flip Chicago in a different direction. That's always hard because Illinois Democrats control the state and they siphon most of money, power, and everything towards Cook County and Chicago, with the excuses of like that's our international hub. So, hey Jerry, you're back.
I am back. I don't know what was going on. I have a hardwire connection and it suddenly dropped, and then I activated my Wi-Fi. And I want to thank RCN for interrupting my connection to the show tonight. But anyway, I'm back. So thank you for filling the time there with the details, continuing that story, because I didn't know if we were both off or not. So yeah, what I was going to comment on was, and we've got Preckwinkle was going to come back and run for mayor again, as if she's any kind of a suitable replacement or alternative to Mayor Lightfoot. They're both the same. Two sides of the same coin. Probably. I did find what I feel is a good link regarding that story with COVID that I'm actually kind of surprised you hadn't heard some of this chatter that was going on, but I'm going to bring this up. This comes from Breaking Points on YouTube. And again, what's up with my darn? Oh, come on. I like to listen to Crystal and Sagar on Breaking Points. They used to be with The Hill. And they've been covering this story about how Fauci's now doing a complete 180 on, on the theory of the lab leak, and how it's everything that they're looking into right now points to the fact that may have been what happened. I don't know if people are in the live chat. Let me try one more time to bring this up. For whatever reason, I saved a link from YouTube, and I do think it's very relevant to what we're talking about with COVID here.
Sure.
Bring up my history. Sorry, everybody. Please just stand by. I'll have it up in just a second here. All right, here we go. Copy the link. See, what I'm doing is we have to run on Chrome with StreamYard because Safari doesn't work with StreamYard, but then I end up bringing in, I look at my Safari window also for links that I've had saved and stuff. All right, so now we're bringing up the segment on COVID in the lab, and hopefully it'll load in a second. I'll be able to play it back. Here we go. Make sure the volume's up. Come on. Okay, here we go. Stand by. This is probably the clunkiest show that we've done with technical difficulties, so I'm really sorry to everybody in the audience. Thanks for hanging in there with us.
I know it's cliche. Another lab leak monologue from Sagar. Isn't there anything else going on? The answer is yes. That's why I have an entire show full of other news. But I choose to stick to this story because the more it progresses, The more details that come out, the further it is revealed that we are in the midst of the uncovering of one of the great cover-ups and lies of the 21st century. I did not think I would live through another Iraq WMD in my lifetime, but that's exactly what's happening today. By now, you're all familiar with the cover-up that the media and the public health establishment pulled on all of us by dismissing the lab leak theory early in the pandemic. But what people forget about Iraq WMD is that really weird 1 or 2 year period after the invasion where all the people who lied started massaging the truth in past statements. Rumsfeld and Bush, they all came out and said some version of, oh, well, actually it was about democracy, or we never specified what kind of WMD, or actually some BS rockets that we found. We'll try to reclassify WMD, which makes this entire
he's making the point.
That's the version of WMD we're at right now. Look no further than
he's making the point that the way that they've covered up the lab leak theory is the same way that they covered up. They said that there were weapons of mass destruction when there weren't. Right. The alternate being they said it didn't originate in a lab when a lot of evidence is pointing to the fact it probably did. Continue.
Yeah. Worst actor in this scenario, Dr. Anthony
I would just say though, saying that it is a lab leak when it wasn't a lab leak is the same as saying there is WMDs and there.
Well, I didn't mean to infer that it is a lab leak.
I'm just
clarifies that there's a lot of evidence pointing to the fact that it could have been. And the fact that they covered it up instead of embracing it last year. Now, look, they didn't. Yeah. Trump was out there saying it was a lab leak, and
he ran on that fact.
But Jose, they politicized it because it came from Trump, and because Trump was using it with racist, bigoted motives by deciding, because it originated from Wuhan, he was gonna demonize and Asian people. Okay. Right. Trump's reasons for pointing to Wuhan had less to do with our country's reactive time and more to do with him sowing more bigotry and racism against Asian people. Had people not looked at the political aspects of what he was doing, they only focused on, well, it couldn't come from a lab because Trump said it came from a lab, and that means we have to just mistrust Asian people. No.
It was also the World Health Organization, right?
Yes.
Right.
Our government, as well as other governments around the world, fund the research that goes on in the Wuhan lab. So, we are complicit in creating these viruses that are meant to be created so we can potentially avert disaster with antidotes. But in this case, something went out of control. So let me let him finish his point here, though, because he set up the weapons.
Did he mention the World Health Organization?
I think he's going to. Yeah, hang on. Let me let it get through his whole, because this is a minute into a 5-minute editorial.
Lies theory. Let's take a listen.
People forget that, but if you go back then, even though you lean towards feeling that this is more likely a natural occurrence, we always felt that you've got to keep an open mind. All of us. We didn't get up and start announcing it, but we've always said, keep an open mind and continue to look. So I think it's a bit of a distortion to say that we deliberately suppress that.
Oh, a bit of a distortion, huh, Dr. Fauci? Luckily, we live in the internet age, and that falsehood is easily disproven. Some of us remember happened this one in May of 2020, in which Fauci definitively said there was no evidence whatsoever that the coronavirus leaked from the Wuhan lab, saying, quote, everything about the stepwise evolution over time strongly indicates this virus evolved in nature and then jumped species. We also know from the Fauci emails revealed earlier this month that at the time Fauci said that, he had countervailing evidence of the very fact in his inbox on January 31st, 2021, from a scientist later involved in the cover-up itself. The virus was, quote, not consistent with evolutionary theory. I know I'm retreading old facts. I want to underscore this for all of you. The extent to which the people in charge shamelessly lied to us all. And make no mistake, this matters. People were removed from Twitter for floating the lab leak theory. Many people discussing it were given terms of service violations based upon completely wrong reporting from the mainstream media. We saw the full danger of oligarchic power when legacy media outlets get to decide what is true and what is not. And then their allies at the tech companies and elsewhere in our culture enforce their vision of the truth, whatever the facts may be. And my message to all of them, at least those who might be aware of this show, is this. Have you no shame? Do you not currently have enough egg on your face from this not to keep at it? I'll preface this part and say this. I don't know a goddamn thing about ivermectin, COVID, or spike proteins. I personally believe the vaccine is completely safe. I got 2 doses of Moderna. I feel better than ever. Crystal got the vaccine as well. But what I would say is this. At this point, how can the tech companies confidently say they know anything with certainty when it comes to coronavirus? How can they have so much hubris that they are willing to outright censor Dr. Brett Weinstein on this when all he did was have a panel of experts and discuss it a year ago? A year ago, Weinstein was the first and frankly only real voice willing to even discuss the lab leak theory prominently. I have no idea if what he is saying is true or not, only that I know him to be an important source of information to me personally. But the worst part is this. The people who are telling us that Weinstein is wrong in this case, the people who are ensuring that he will be taken off the platform, and to those that they rely on for expertise, they're the ones who lied to us about the lab leak theory in the first place. This is the problem with events like this. Who are we supposed to trust? After Vietnam and Iraq WMD and the financial crisis, most Americans can reasonably say they probably shouldn't trust anything the government tells them whenever a war is involved. And now when it comes to coronavirus and the outright cover-up of the lab leak theory, we're in a very similar situation. We're in a disinformation crisis, like the media says. The problem is the very purveyors of disinformation are those charged with telling us the truth, and those who they listen to. It is dangerous times that we are living in, and it is only going to get worse. And Crystal, we've received a lot of.
So yeah, that's. I think he's dead on point. And actually, Nancy K in the live chat, you mentioned when Jon Stewart was on Stephen Colbert's show. I actually was looking at that video to bring up, but I thought it was probably a little too comedic to drive the point home, as much as I thought that Sagar and Jetty's editorial here would actually, lean more on the facts for people to make a determination on how much has been covered up in the interest of politics.
Covered
and
up, though?
Well, why covered up in the sense that why did they decide they were going to dismiss the lab leak theory last year? Completely dismissed it. It's not possible at all.
The World Health Organization was pushing back on that. So, Trump called them a liar, and we shouldn't fund them.
Well, the World Health Organization was pushing back on the lab leak theory?
Well, the World Health Organization's statements were it politicized here in the US, I think is one of the things that also is in play here. The UN had told the US and the world that they found no evidence of WMDs. So you had Colin Powell call the UN inspectors liars or just incompetent, and that he was positive they had WMDs. There was some of that going on in America, I felt, to push not only that it was a lab leak, but that it was a targeted attack on America.
The targeted attack is what Trump politicized, though. Yeah. That's what that was all bullshit. That's how he politicized it, to dismiss the possibility that it did come out of a lab. He said that the Chinese did this on purpose, and that's all bullshit. We know that. But because he said it, and because it came out of Trump's mouth, is why everybody was so willing to jump on and say, no, it couldn't have come from a lab, because Trump is saying it was an attack on us when it dismissed.
It's not even did it come from a lab? I think that Trump said a lot of crazy things. He could have come from a lab, but it was also the implications of what it coming from a lab meant to Trump for the election that made it problematic. And also why revisiting it, to me, is not this big gotcha of oh my God, we were censored, for a year, and look at how much the ruling class has power over our minds. It's always been the case. And we always have to be vigilant and push back against it. But I also think that you have to take into account what the global narrative around COVID was, and whether it came from a lab or not. I'm trying to find the comment. Yeah, as to now, the evidence from jumping from bats or lab leak is weak for both hypotheses. If I had to take either case to court, I'd have zero confidence in arguing for either one. I don't know where COVID came from, but I know that the implications.
I just don't think we can fully dismiss that possibility with everything that's been coming out now.
I guess if people, you don't want to dismiss that it came from a lab, and I was open to this conversation. We had these conversations on Heartland's Media all of last year. That's why I stayed on, online media, during COVID to hash out like those conversations of like, what do we do? But the prevalent theory, sentiment was also like, who cares? Where it ultimately came from, we're handling it in a terrible way. I guess my thing is that what I get from the government's response to COVID, them silencing lab leak theories,
silencing other potential treatments like ivermectin. That's the drug I was talking about. There were doctors who were speaking before Congress, and that was being suppressed, that there was evidence that ivermectin could be used to treat COVID cases and protect people. And because
he should have bribed Trump, that's on him. That's something like, if he really wanted to save people's lives, he should have bribed Trump, and we would have heard all about that treatment.
Well, but Jose, he spoke before Congress, and all of that stuff was suppressed. There's video of him speaking to Congress on ivermectin. Okay. So the government suppressed information regarding that potential. We want to joke about Trump.
That is problematic. I also, can they be liable for what he's saying and they can't verify it at the time, and maybe he was right? Like, they shouldn't be suppressing that information. Definitely,
he had evidence that did prove, he did have evidence and data that showed that it was advantageous in treating COVID. And this was, and as late as December of 2020, I'm reading right now, AP News was saying there's no evidence ivermectin is a miracle drug against COVID-19. This was one of those solutions that was being presented by doctors that was being suppressed. And I think it was last December that started coming out. Ivermectin is a possibility. And it's like, well, why didn't we hear about this before? Because media was covering it up, or they were telling us a different story.
Yeah. I can see why that, like, people would say, oh man, ivermectin. Yeah, I don't know what this drug is. There was a lot of cures going on during COVID. Ivermectin, maybe was a real one. I go back to like the solution in the face of like not knowing the exact science was a political solution that was untenable to the ruling class, which was letting working class people stay at home and stay safe. Yeah. That was ultimately the untenable solution. And to me, like, that's a conversation that's not being that's why I get annoyed, like, because it might have come from a lab. I don't know. But I feel like the resurfacing of this conversation is to rehash the politics of where that narrative was circling around last year. And ultimately, we don't know any more than we did last year. All we know is that the government did these specific shady things, which is what they do. They do shady shit, but what does that mean for us right now? Does that mean, that this was a concentrated attack and they're like suppressing that fact? Or is that something that they're going to come out with later? Or is this just like, this is all from malpractice because of of our governments working together and or not working together,
I'm not suggesting it was a concentrated attack, Jose. All I'm pointing to, and as we went off in this direction, was that the way that Trump used the possibility of emerging from a lab and as a weaponized plot to sow more racism and bigotry against Asian people is why people dismiss the possibility. And it was
also because it was his excuse for letting over 500,000 Americans die.
I know that.
No, it was like
he was using it as a way to deflect from the fact he wasn't ready and they weren't working fast enough to advise people.
Jerry, they didn't do anything.
I know they didn't do anything.
No, it wasn't that they weren't working fast enough. They were not working because they were working this narrative.
And they were telling people, don't worry about wearing masks, as opposed to, here's the thing. If you don't have enough masks and you need them for your frontline workers, I get that. Tell people wear wear these scarves. Wear something, make something at home to cover your faces. But they weren't even doing that. I'm in complete agreement with you. I'm not disagreeing with you on what they were doing and the reasons why they were doing those things. My point, though, I think, was that to completely discount it now, it's still an evolving story. It's a continuing story. It's a It's a developing story, and there's more and more eyes on this right now. Whether we can't go back in time and change anything, but I was just pointing to the fact. I forgot how we got off on this direction, but the fact that it wasn't. If you brought it up last year because of the way Trump was politicizing it, you were immediately marginalized. And if it had evolved in a lab, and you started researching, well, what if it was, which particular lab, what were they doing there? That could have led maybe to a speedier solution to finding vaccines or whatever. But yeah, they weren't doing anything. He was using that narrative to deflect from the fact that they weren't doing anything. Blaming the Chinese, feeding into xenophobia and bigotry.
But it was also gearing up for a Cold War showdown with China, and this narrative being resurfaced is doing the exact same thing.
I don't think the narrative of it evolving in a lab has anything to do with. If anything, I'm not looking at the possibility that it emerged from the Wuhan lab as the blame of the Chinese. Once again. Our government, other governments fund the research in that lab. I blame those that are funding the research in that lab, and they're doing it over in China. They don't want to do that kind of research over here. Yeah. If our governments are supplementing and funding that research to create potential antidotes or vaccines, then we are responsible for whatever went wrong in that lab. That doing that research somewhere else where we didn't have the right kind of control over it. That's how I look at it. I'm not blaming China, and I'm not suggesting that it evolving in a Chinese lab has anything to do with any kind of a plot that they had. I'm looking more at who was funding that research to let this cat out of the bag.
I guess my thing is that this was something that was hashed out to a large degree last year. There's more evidence coming out now. I'm not against, people can talk about whatever they want, I guess my thing is that, Sagar mentioned a couple people that do this kind of this kind of research. I didn't actually see the kind of research that, I was looking for, numbers or lab names or doctor names or, but I'll have to look that up.
And there were a lot of links regarding the story on MSNBC and CNN, and I deliberately didn't bring them up because I don't necessarily trust what CNN or MSNBC or how they were going to spin it. That's why I went to Sagar over Breaking Points, because I respect him and Crystal more and what they do on their show, or some of the other alternative independent journalists that we see on YouTube. So I was looking for the best source of the story, and I think that if you do dig around on Google, you will find some of the research and data that is very, very important to what he was sharing there.
Yeah. I guess ultimately I don't want a Cold War narrative forming around COVID, and especially when there's in the face of a vaccine apartheid going around in the world. Happened in the lab. There's a ton of evidence.
Put that back up. Sorry.
It did not come from bats. All right. That bat thing was kind of weird.
I mean, we're sharing comments from our viewers, and I trust that they're citing, things that they've read and that we're not looking at as far as evidence right now. But I have no reason to discount the things that they're sharing that they've read also.
Yeah.
And Nancy K., this is exactly what I think happened. It came from a lab. They were testing and screwed up. It was not deliberate. China's not sloppy, and this should not be allowed to feed a Cold War narrative at all. Yeah. It was a screw up. It was of magnificent proportions.
I mean,
anyway, we jumped down a rabbit hole here. Talk.
Yeah, I guess I'm not convinced, but yeah, I'm not convinced. People want it to be a lab leak because that makes sense. It was within.
What's your hypothesis based on what you read? What is your instinct gear you more towards?
This is the swine flu. This is something that we were expecting some point this century, and that we're seeing variants of it now because it's going to keep changing. The way that, like, you know, like the bird flu, the swine flu have been changing. And I think that if we were able to just wait it out, that it would pass us by, you know, in a couple of years, but we're not going to. Instead, we're, you know, the origins of it, you know, being murky, I think lends to a reality where we're always taking booster shots and always monetizing the treatment for it. If we cough it up to like, well, it's also like, you know, a man-made disease that, you know, we've allowed to get out of control.
Not allowed. Accidentally, there was some lapses in whatever.
But we are allowing in real time at the moment to continue to get out of control in some areas. And yeah.
Well, once it's out of control, then you know the genie's out of the bottle. I mean, now that's like it's the damage control. You know, in trying to do something proactive, creating a virus to create the vaccines to protect us against it. You know, now we're in the treatment phase of like, oh, well, it got out of control. And now, you know, we didn't intend for it to get out of control. And we weren't ready with the vaccinations or the ways to treat what could potentially happen with this particular strain of virus that COVID is, I believe, originally steeped in. But I think in another 10 years, we're going to know what happened. I think that, again, it's a developing story. There's more eyes on what happened as a way to treat people and hopefully, you know, start vaccinating or creating more vaccinations to protect people and start pulling this back. But, you know, as to what the real reason was, I tend to lean more towards the idea that someone screwed up in a lab, because I just think that I don't trust our government officials or those that are responsible for protecting us to not screw up in such a magnificent fashion, because we've seen, you know, our government and our leaders screw up in so many different ways in the past. And when Sagar was using the WMD example of, we were sure that there were WMDs there, and you know, we're still at war in the Middle East because of that. So anyway.
Well, I don't know if we were sure. I think that we wanted there to be.
We weren't sure. I know from what I've read, and I was about to say I know for a fact, Colin Powell, before he went and appeared before Congress, did not want to give that narrative. Behind the door, those doors, there were people who were saying, he was saying this report is bullshit. This proves nothing. But Bush and Rumsfeld, may he rest in hell, wanted their war. And that's all that mattered at that time. So
yeah, no. And I mean, that I guess I see that parallel being closer to, you know, the other way of the lab leak, you know, at origin in the lab, but it makes sense for it to come from a lab. So I'll stop pushing back. I don't want
to argue. Jose, you're not right. I'm not right.
I'm not arguing with you. I'm just like the whole notion of the whole point of it. Like, you know, not arguing with Sagar, or like, I am trying to argue with CNN and MSNBC, I guess, at this point. You know, why they were against it last year and they're for it this year, I think is, you know, the cynical, well, they didn't want the Cold War under Trump, but they want it under Biden. I guess that's where I'm at.
Of course. Yeah. We're seeing that. The hypocrisy. Yeah. Anyway, we're past an hour and a half. We've had some really good discussion. And even if we may disagree on some things, I completely respect why you feel. I mean, I don't know that I'm right. My instinct,
it totally makes sense for you.
Yeah, your instinct is based on how you're reading the situation, and in time, we're going to find out what the story was, and hopefully by that time, this will be behind us, and this will prevent something like this from happening ever again, and being better prepared to protect people from a pandemic like this. So, Jose, as always, pleasure to get on with you tonight and talk about everything happening in our local sphere, as well as now national, as we were talking about the pandemic.
Yeah. Good talking to you as always, Jerry. Thanks for being here.
Yeah. So I'll be back on again this Friday. Not sure what we're covering, but I do want to also share next Monday night, Daniel Lupker of Hardlands Media will be joining me, and we'll just be kind of having a chat on our views on news and social media. This all evolved from a phone conversation we had a couple weeks ago about the whole Jimmy Dore TYT controversy, but just the main, the more the broader sense of like how social media is like driving all these arguments between YouTubers and independent journalists and stuff.
Yeah.
Anything else you have to share before we bring the show to a close, Jose?
No, just I try not to. Nah, I don't want to weigh in on all that.
No, what? Oh, on the T1. Well, we can talk about it next week, or maybe I can bring you in when I have Daniel on Monday.
Yeah, maybe. Let me know.
All right, I will. We'll talk about the States.
Right.
That'd be cool. I think that'd be an interesting conversation because I am in agreement and disagreement with Kit and Daniel on a few things, and I'm sure you are too. As we're like watching what's been going on there and how it's distracting from other things. But anyway, to our viewers who joined us in the live chat, thanks for participating. Please like and subscribe. Please share our show on Facebook, social media, Twitter, anywhere you have friends that you feel would enjoy what we are chatting about here on YouTube. If it's happening on the streets, you'll hear about it on Chicago Corner. Thanks for joining us, everyone, and have a good night and a safe week.
There.